Welcome to our listeners, and thank you for your great feedback to our first two episodes of Can You See What I Can See? Vicky Scott here, and today my co-host Grace Hart and I want to talk about something that's becoming more and more common today: grandparents raising grandchildren.
Yeah.
And it isn't just actually happening in Australia, Grace. It seems to be a global phenomenon. Well, what do you think, Grace? I can see a world where grandparents are a big part of raising their grandkids, but it's done from a place of it takes a village to raise a child, and not so much from a place of where raising grandkids is being done from necessity and where sometimes resentment sets in. What do you see?
Yeah, I can see that too. I'm really curious. Show me more. Tell me more about what you see. But yeah, I can see that too.
Oh, well, I guess now that I am a grandparent of four lovely kids, and I just love, having that opportunity to get to know them through their visits to us or us to them. And I love to see their parents grow into that parental role so beautifully. But I didn't know until I found out the other day that the Raising Children Network website says that more than 22,000 families in Australia are made up of grandparents actually raising their grandkids full time, or at least a lot of the time. And it's usually as a result of a family crisis of some kind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with COVID and so many changes, or it could be there's mental health issues or addictive issues, and these grandparents are kind of thrown in the deep end, and it's so easy to function from that that I have no choice, etc. So, but firstly, I just want to acknowledge something. You mentioned you have four grandkids, and because I know you, I know that one of those kids is what I call an extra grandkid. When when I had quote unquote stepchildren, I hated that word, and I thought, you know what, I'm never going to call that. I'm going to call them my extra children. And when I referred to the other party, I referred to, for example, the step mum. I referred to her as the extra mum, and it just changed the energy so beautifully, because it's an honouring. It's like there's this gift that comes in when families are extended, so to speak, and that's a different that's a whole different conversation of what I can see, because I think a lot of people don't see it that way.
Wow!
But I just want to acknowledge you do have four.
Thank you.
You do have four grandkids. Yeah,
I do.
Yeah.
And it is a choice that we make as to how we want, what energy do we want to have around them, and helping them feel as much part of our family as we want them to. And yeah, so but with this situation about grandparents, it came to me the other day when I was with another friend, and she was having to go off and pick up her grandkids to go to school, and because of some trauma in the family. And it really made it real for me about, wow, because she was copping some flack from others that said you shouldn't be doing as much as you're doing. So I love what you said about choice. But you don't mean choice necessarily in whether you do it or you don't do it. It's that thing around who you be when you do it. Is that what you say some more about that?
Yeah, it's so easy to go into the right thing to do, or there's no choice, or I'm the grandmother, there's no one else, or there's no facilities, or we can't afford anything else. And what I'm saying is there's always choice. Even if you don't feel that there's choice, there's always choice. And when we spoke about in the last couple of podcasts, coming from the center of your flower, and I know this situation where there was this lady that her son was involved in this court case, and it was quite horrific what was happening. And so the right thing to do was for her as a mum and a grandmum to actually be there for him and turn up to court with him and turn up to mediation and turn up to, the mentions and the hearings. However, because she is in my life, she said to me, I'm feeling like I have to, and I want to change that. And I loved that. I love that she was open to a different possibility. And when I actually asked her some questions, the first thing I asked her was, is it actually going to generate and create for you to be involved in this way? And she's like, oh my gosh, I never thought to ask that. And wow, what I'm actually getting is no. And so she was in the center of the flower, and it took courage. And she actually said to the son, I'm choosing not to attend court with you or, go to the legal things with you. And the son was devastated. He was just saying, but Mom, I really need you. And she said, you know what? I know that, and just know that I'm with you, but I've just got this gut feeling. And, Vic, we talked about you and your amazing gut, how you just know things. And this woman just said, I just have this gut feeling that I'm not meant to do this, and just, can you trust me? And so he was wounded, but he knew greater. He knows his mom. And anyway, cut a long story short, the very first day that he went into the courts, he's sitting by himself, and this lady comes up to him and says, hey, I just noticed you're sitting by yourself, and where are you at? And anyway, what ended up happening is she introduced something to him that he had no idea it was in existence. It was a service, and that service allowed him to not have to give evidence at all. There was just some bit of information that he was missing. He had no idea about his rights. And he actually said to this lady, I'm just curious, if I was sitting here with a friend or a family member, would you have come up? And she said, no, I wouldn't have. And this is where, we can think we should do something. I must, I'm a good mum. A bad mum wouldn't, I'll be a bad mum if I don't be there this way for my child or my grandchild. And what I'm saying is, what if there's a greater viewpoint that your gut knows, but maybe you don't,
Yeah, you talk about being in a cupboard, I've heard you say. Can you say some more about that?
Yeah. So, I give the example of imagine that you're in a tiny cupboard and it's closed, and so your reality is just what you can see, only what's inside the cupboard. And what if there was a person outside that said, hey, you're actually in a big room? And this person says, no, I'm not. I can't see a big room. And so what I'm saying is, can you see what I see as an invitation to maybe you're in a cupboard and you don't realize it? And then, you can take it further. The person in the room might think they can only see what's in the room, and there's another person that goes, actually, you're in a house. And then there could be another person that goes, well, actually, you're in the middle of a forest, in a state in Australia. Or, and so it's this willingness, and the gut has this, vantage point that is so vast and so great that it knew that person needed to be alone so it could get, he could get that opportunity and then not be involved in the way that was causing him stress. The gut knew that. But, when you're in the cupboard saying, Mum, I need your help, and you're wrong to not help me, that's that cupboard viewpoint. So he was brave enough to go, even though I don't like it, I trust you. And the mum, oh my gosh, the mum got so much judgment. How can you not care for your child? And, and it takes bravery to see a different reality, doesn't it?
Oh, wow. Well, I think that's what actually influences a lot of the decisions we make in this world as it is today, because we are concerned about what others will think and how we will be perceived by others as maybe being not caring or not loving enough or not supportive enough, but in other ways we're our own worst enemy, where we have a point of view that it's almost a righteousness that we have around, we're going to prove that our point of view is more right than somebody else's.
Absolutely. You've brought up two things. For me, judgment is the number one disease, the number one killer on the planet. And if we got out of that, we'd be a much happier planet and people. And you also talked about that righteousness. And what I'm really passionate about is, okay, let's use that. Okay, what if there's someone that's right and someone that's wrong? Or maybe they're both right. And I love to use the example of, imagine holding up a piece of paper in front of you, and the side that I can see is white, and the other side is black. And if I held it up to you, Vic, and I said, hey, what colour do you see? You'd say black. And I'd say, no, you're wrong. It's white. And so this is the thing, if we get caught up in this argument, that's really, what is it going to generate and create? To argue this, wouldn't it actually be, what if we actually looked at what is it going to generate and create? What is it that we can choose? And, this lady was willing to ask that question. What would it create if I attended all these legal things with my son? And she got the awareness it wouldn't generate and create. And yes, it takes bravery. And, I think that every time we go into any form of, reason and justification or righteousness or superiority, we're functioning from that tiny little cupboard. And, we're not in the center of the flower. We're behaving from the petals. And, we talked about that in other podcasts, that when you're being you, That's the most delicious, beautiful, generative thing you can be when you're you and you're aware of all the good, the bad, and the ugly about you. They're the petals, but you're actually functioning from that gut that you have so beautiful. Gosh, your gut is this superpower that I love and I trust.
Yeah, I love that expression. That we can just think we're positive people, but really, if we're not willing to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly in every situation, then we're actually shutting out a lot of our own awareness, really. We make choices from that place of being willing to see the whole rather than just a part of it.
Yeah, we start to live from conclusion. The right thing to do is this. A good mother does that, or a good grandparent should not do this or do this. And the thing that's beautiful is if you can actually change the narrative and say, okay, there's something up here. What is this? And what can I choose? If I'm the chooser of my reality, what can I choose? And a lot of people think that life happens to them, but it's happening for them, and there's a co-creation there. And so there are no musts and shoulds and haves. That's all when you're functioning from the pedal. And as I said, it does take bravery, but the outcome is always so much grander. There's so much more, there's so much elegance to the universe if we are willing to come from our beingness. I remember you talking about beautiful Wendy, and actually share that story.
Oh yes, Wendy Wattigo. Wendy and I co-founded the Stars Institute of Learning and Leadership, and she's a Quandamooka woman from Minjerribah, Stradbroke Island. We were going into an Aboriginal community to do a program, and the relationship between the police and the community had never really been good, but it was an even bigger rift had developed because a couple of years before that, an Aboriginal man had died in custody, and the matter was still not resolved. And I said to Wendy, I don't really know how to introduce myself. Should I say that I'm the mother of a police officer who actually worked on Palm Island? And and Wendy said to me, Vic, it doesn't matter what you say, it's who you be when you say it. So it really hit home to me about, oh, wow, if I'm in the centre of my flower, then it's going to impact the words that come out of my mouth, really.
Yeah, impact the universe. I'm that sort of person that believes that when you speak from that authenticity, when you speak from your beingness, it's delicious and it's so generative, and it always creates greater. Even if what you do or choose, people can go into judgment of or have a hard time with, there is still that, that vantage point. There is still that greater that, in hindsight, they'll probably get to, maybe not this lifetime. But so it's such a beautiful thing. And, I really want to acknowledge you asked. And that's the thing, when you're in a petal, you don't tend to ask. But when you're in your beingness, you recognize there was that beauty in you that said, hey, they've gone through some hardship with this loss of life, and they've also gone through, generations of hardship. And, I'm a white lady. And so with that, how can I be? And there's such beauty and kindness and caring in that ask. It's that recognition of they require something. What can I be for them? And ultimately, any product you create or any service you give or any talk you give, it's never about you. It should never be about you. It should always be about, creating something greater. And sure, you can't affect every single person you speak to. However, there's a percentage of people that are willing to acknowledge, I'm in a cupboard, and there could just be someone that knows something that I can't see. And you know what? I'm really excited about that. And at the end of the day, using that example, they're in a cupboard and they hear this voice from the ether saying, yes, you're in a cupboard, but there's this whole room out here, you have a choice on what's going to generate and create for you. And sometimes the kindness is for you to stay in the cupboard. And this is what we don't understand. When we see a possibility that somebody could choose that would alleviate their financial problem or their health problem or their relationship problem. And from our bigger vantage point, we're like, hey, come on, come out of the cupboard. And, but it might be that person requires to be in that cupboard just that little bit longer. There's an ease to things. There's a time and space for things, and we can only see what we know. And you've got to trust the awareness of other people. And to me, that's the kindest thing, to actually encourage people to know what they know, to encourage people to follow their own awareness, and any questions you can ask to. And a great question is, are you in a cupboard right now? I've got my dolphins around me, my friends around me. I call them dolphins. And, sometimes I can't see something and they're like, hey, Grace, are you in a cupboard right now? And I'll just start laughing. I'm like, oh my God, yes, I can feel the energy. There's a cupboard. There's these constraints, and if you're willing to, that's what I'm passionate about, energies. And, if you're willing to ask a question, you'll start to perceive the energy. And it's like, oh, yeah, I can feel the conclusion around me. I can feel the walls around me. Okay, do I want to keep functioning that way? Is it actually going to generate and create? Hell no, So what can I choose? And going back to, our topic, a lot of parents, they feel like they've been put in the cupboard. I know of a lady who is looking after twins and has for a very long time due to the parents being alcoholics. And she felt like she was shoved in a cupboard. She was really expansive and happy, and all of a sudden now she's back to being a mum again of two very, very young kids, and doing the the preschool run and all this sort of stuff. And she's like, what is happening? Like, I've got no choice, and these kids will be taken from us if I don't step up, and I don't want to step up, but at the same time I have to step up. And that's that judgment that we talk about. And so I said to her, okay, it sounds like you're functioning from a bit of necessity and no choice universe. Would you like to change that? And she was ready for some change. She was willing to sort of, just peek open the cupboard door just a little, not fly it open. She was sort of stuck in that on a pedal, thinking everything's terrible, and now my life's ruined, because I was looking forward to this, traveling around Australia and everything, having my life back.
Yeah.
And anyway, we asked questions, and what she got to was, oh my goodness, my grandkids are actually choosing some wisdom from me that they wouldn't have gotten if they were raised by their parents. And all of a sudden there was this lightness in her world. And she's, okay, so do I choose that? Am I choosing to give them that wisdom, that library that they didn't have access to unless, they come live here? And there was just this beauty, and all of a sudden she was glowing, and that kind of stuckness and no choice universe and made to just disappeared. It just melted. And, so she did look after them. She still has a lot of access with them. So this is where, we've got to be willing. And, I know that you've talked about your beautiful friends, and it's so easy to come from the conclusion on, oh, I love my grandkids. I love spending time with them. Oh, yeah, it'd be totally fine to look after them or take them to school or whatever. Well, what I'm inviting you to is maybe ask, even though you would love to, even though it'd be a good time, even though, of course it would be a contribution to you both, is that what is required? And if it is, great. But if it's not, be willing and brave to say, I'm actually stepping back here. I heard of a grandparent that with all the COVID stuff that was kind of going, okay, maybe we should, build an extension, or maybe we should do this or do that. And it's great to ask these questions, but you've really got to get to what's going to create greater for you.
Wow. That's a hard one, isn't it? When, people of my generation, we've just been indoctrinated, I suppose, that's your job. You just do what you need to do, and without asking those better questions, or being willing to get out of the cupboard, I guess. That's one of the reasons I was really happy to do these podcasts, because none of this language was around for me growing up, and it certainly wasn't there for my parents. And I always wanted something different for my kids and grandkids now, to say, we do need to find that new library where the vocabulary it makes it okay for us to trust, to be in the centre of the flower. And that's all our job is to come from that place. And you talked before about the grandparents and the impact on them, and the resentment that actually comes. I'm so pleased to see the medical profession, especially Dr. Gabor Mate. He's written a book, When the Body Says No, the cost of hidden stress. And a lot of his research over many years with his patients has found that a lot of the physical illnesses not just mental illnesses, but physical illnesses, have been caused by a long-held resentment for things that people felt they had no choice in, and then were forced into a situation where it's actually started to affect them physically. So I can see now that, it's not just about a perception of whether other people think we're doing the right or wrong thing. It's actually, impacting us in every way in our lives.
Yeah, it does take bravery to stay in the center of the flower, and especially when the majority of the planet are functioning from petals. They're functioning from that fear. We talked about safety, security, and support, and so many people don't feel that safety, security, and support to say, you know what, even though it doesn't make sense, the center of the flower, what I'm getting is I need to do this or that. And there's a big difference between neediness and need. And this woman that I spoke to, she just knew she needed to step back and not be involved in her son's legal stuff. She just knew it, and I'm sure the listeners there would have that moment where they knew that, they needed to take take an action. And, I remember a friend of a friend, there was, the tragedy of the Bali bombing, and this lady was actually going to a bridal party. And that night of the bombing, it's interesting how it all happened too. It was her best friend. She was the maid of honor. And she said to her friend, what do you want to do in Bali? And she said, you know what, you have total autonomy, surprise me. But the only thing I want to do is go to this particular nightclub the night before. That was the only sort of non-negotiable. She had total, she could do whatever she wanted to do. And of course, she's walking in, the bridal party's walking in, and this lady said it was the weirdest feeling. It was like there was no oxygen and everything slowed down and became sticky. And she was the last person to step in. Everyone else was sort of ahead of her. And she took a step in, and just this sinking gut feeling. And so all in that moment, she had all this judgment. I can't do that. This is the one thing that my best friend asked to do. Like, if it was anything else, I could say, abort, reverse. And so in that moment, and she just went, no, I have to. And she said to the friend, she said, hang on a second. She said, I've just got a really weird feeling. And it's so strong that I'm willing to step away. So if you want to go ahead, but please, every part of me is saying we need to not be here right now. Now, these people were very normal people. They weren't psychic or into sort of anything metaphysical. There were a bunch of lawyers, actually. And no criticism to lawyers. I'm sure there's intuitive lawyers out there. I just realised it's probably not a nice thing to say to lawyers. They get a bad rap. Anyway, so they did choose to walk away, and they got to the end of the street, round the corner, and the explosion went off. And so this is where, if we're willing, you see, in that moment, the bride to be could have turned around and gone, "How could you? This is the only thing I wanted to." And you've got to be willing. You've got to be willing to stand your ground and say, "I see something different. I see something greater here." And that's what it takes for us. And it's not fun sometimes being that. Yeah.
No, you're right, Grace. And it just reminds me about, for the next week, maybe some home play we could do is that just notice our own choices that we're making and how you feel about it. So if somebody asks you to do something, then when you do it, how do you feel? Are you doing it because it feels light, or because you think it's
you have to.
You have to. Yes, exactly. Or there's no one else, or it's expected, or if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. And just notice the difference in how you feel. Maybe listen to your gut and just take a second just to notice how your body feels when you say yes in a moment when you really want to say no. So that's my suggestion. What do you think?
No, I think you've nailed it. I think that's brilliant. And it is like, just pay attention, guys. Pay attention to, what's going on. And if you can, the subtleties energetically. When you're saying yes or no to something, as Vic said, is there a lightness? Is there this spaciousness? Or do you feel contracted? And if you're going into the, should I, shouldn't I, chances are you're on a pedal. Come back to that center of your flower and ask, what will it create if I actually do this or say this or take this action? Look at your life from a generative, creative point of view versus, as Vic said so beautifully, yeah, I have to, this is the right thing to do. Let's stop that narrative and let's start to look at creating a whole new world together. And that's what I see, Vic.
Oh, I love that. And well, Grace and I look forward to hearing what you can see that we can't see,
Yeah.
and it will create greater in your world.
Absolutely. So bye, guys, and we'll catch you next week. And of course, do let us know what you would like us to talk about, any topics, and also share with us any aha moments that you've had due to listening to our podcast. And maybe you got out of the cupboard or you got out of the house, or maybe you assisted someone else too. All right. Have a beautiful week, and we'll catch you next week. Bye.